Hey guys, how's it going? Hope everybody's doing well out there today. My original plan for today was to show you how to set up a system status page so that you can monitor different services, whether it's on your network or other websites, things like that. You can basically monitor whatever you want with a service or a Docker container called Uptime Kuma. However, recently I've been getting several comments in the comment sections of different videos saying that people are having a hard time getting NGINX Proxy Manager to work properly with their system. So today we're going to kind of do a twofer. I'm going to first, as this video is going to be kind of done in a few different parts, and I will have timestamps below where you can skip around and find the parts that you're looking for. The first part of this video is going to be how to set up Uptime Kuma in a Docker container using Portainer or Docker Compose stacks, however you want to say that. We're going to do this in Portainer, but once that is set up and I've kind of shown you how to use it, that sort of thing, then we're going to jump into the process of setting up NGINX Proxy Manager in such a way that we can access Uptime Kuma from a domain name. So I think that's going to kind of cover everything. Again, there will be timestamps in the description down below for the different chapters of this video. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at how to set up Uptime Kuma as a service status page in Docker using Portainer. So first off, here is Uptime Kuma. This is kind of the behind the scenes, the dashboard that you have to log in order to see. So basically we can see that we've got 3 services that we're monitoring here. We can see that all of these are green. They've all been up. There's been no issues. If there was an issue at any point, you would see that here somewhere in one of those dots with the corresponding time frame. In fact, if you hover over one of those, you can see a little time frame thing pops up with the status. In that case, it was 200, meaning, okay, things are good to go. So if we can actually go a little bit further, we can see statuses here. Like it says here, 3 records that we're following. If we wanted to, we could open one of these up and get a status page of that particular domain, that service, whatever, where you can see current response times, average response times, uptimes for 24 hours, uptime for the last 30 days, as well as when the certificate will expire. So some good information here. And again, all of this, you can kind of see a historical log of all of those response times when the service was pinged. So all of the stuff that we're seeing right now is only accessible via login as far as this real granular data. However, there is a public facing page that we can take a look at as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the status page. Now, this could be open to the public if you wanted it to be. By default, it is. You could obviously put this behind, a password or something using NGINX Proxy Manager, which again, we'll take a look at here in a little bit. But basically here you can kind of get a rough idea, just at a quick glance, what's going on. If there were any incidents down here, you could show those as well. Also, if you were running this and you knew that other people were going to be looking at it, so we'll go ahead and click on Edit Status Page, and we could then create an incident right here. We could say maintenance needed to reboot for updates or whatever. Below that, we can either post it, we can cancel it, or we can set a specific type of incident here, whether it's just informational, it's a warning, danger, preliminary, light or dark. I don't know why. Anyway, so we could just say, hey, this is just information. So by default, that turns to blue. Then we can post. So now we can see that if somebody were to come here, they would see this and they would understand why there was an incident because you've explained it to them. Pretty simple. So below this, we can see all of the services that are currently being monitored on this page. Currently, I've got all of them set up and working here. I don't have any that aren't being displayed on this page. So what we'll want to do here is actually go over here to the dashboard, and that's fine. We can just go ahead and leave that. We're just going to add a new monitor. So on this page, we can see that there are there's a bunch of stuff to take a look at here. So across the top, are we going to do HTTP/HTTPS? Do we want to ping a TCP port? Do we want to take a look at a TCP port? Do we want to ping something? Do we want to do keywords or DNS? We can kind of pick and choose what we want to do there. We're going to keep it simple for the sake of this tutorial. We're just going to say HTTP. We're going to call this Google, and we'll just do, google.com. Now, how often do we want to check? By default, 60 seconds. You could have a certain number of retries before it actually fails. Heartbeat, retry interval. How often do you want to retry do we want to ignore SSL or TLS requests for the HTTP website? This one's kind of weird. It's upside down mode, meaning if the service responds, then there's a problem. So you could check that box as well. Maximum redirects, we've got accepted code statuses of 200 to 299. So that's like earlier I said that, that we had a status of 200, meaning things were okay. So anything in that status range, we could absolutely qualify as okay. If you wanted to, you could put in other status codes for different things. But I think 200 to 299 is what most people are going to use here. And then tags, if you wanted to add tags to that, you absolutely could. So basically, we've got everything that we need to do here, except that up at the top right, we can say, hey, do we want to get notifications when there's an issue with this? So you can turn that on and off as necessary. Then we can just go down here. So now we've got Google right here. It looks like everything looks good. Google is up, 200, okay. Good deal there. So now let's actually go back to our status page. We can then edit the status page. And right here it says add a monitor. So what I'm going to do is click that, and automatically that Google pops up right there. And here we can see now we've added that, and we can click save. So now we've got the option to, that's how we would go through the process of adding additional services to the status page. So very, very simple stuff there. Let's go back to the dashboard. Let's take a look at the settings up here. And then here we've got some different options as far as appearance, themes, light, dark, whatever, time zone, allow indexing or not. I would say if you're going to be self-hosting, you don't want Google's to index this, so discourage search engines from indexing the site. Entry page, you could say dashboard or status board. So when you go to the URL for this service, do you want to go to the dashboard or the status board? You can pick and choose there. You can change your password. You can enable two-factor authentication, which if you're going to self-host, I highly encourage. If you had this and you wanted to move it to a different server, you could actually export your current settings and then import them into a new instance, which I've actually done very successfully. And it's a very slick process for doing that. Again, here's where you would import that. And then advanced, you can disable auth, you can log out, or you can clear all of your statistics if you wanted to do that. Up here at the top right, we've got notifications. Now, this is where I really dig this system, is because we can set up notifications. And there are a bunch of different types of notifications that we can use. I have mine set up through email, and basically it just looks like that. So you would put in, like Gmail alerts, and then you do smpp.gmail.com. Dang. Wow, I just cannot type today. And then 587, we're going to use TTLS. Then you put in your email address, your password for your email address for Google. So that way you can log in to send the email. You can set your from email, your to email. You want to CC or BCC anybody on this, you can do that. Do you want this alert to be enabled by default? For all upcoming new services that you add? Also, do you want to add this to existing services that you're monitoring? So there's a lot of good stuff in here. Of course, there are different options as far as how you can receive your notifications, whether it's through Discord, Telegram, Slack. You can kind of pick what you want to do there, and you'll get your notifications that way pretty easily. So overall, it's a very, very cool system, very easy to use and set up. And I've actually been able to do things like monitor whether or not my TV is on or off based on using a TCP ping. So I was able to do that. I also learned that with my Roku TCL 4K HDR TV, that even if it's turned off, it's still connected to the network. So in order for me to actually get the error message that I was looking for while I was testing this, I actually had to go in and unplug the television in order to get it to disconnect from my network and thus return an error. So learned something about some of the hardware in my own house, that even if they say they're off, they're not really off. Just a new thing with technology, I guess. So that is Uptime Kuma in a nutshell as far as how to use it. Of course, this is a very quick overview because that's not what I really want to focus on in this video. But before we move on to the next section where we're talking more specifically about NGINX Proxy Manager, what I want to do is actually show you how to install this. So let's jump over here to Portainer. Right here is the stack that we're using. It came by default as 3.3. It doesn't need to be 3.3, but there you go. Volumes, I've just set a volume here You could map this to a specific mount point if you wanted to do that. If you had a specific like configuration folder that you wanted to put this in, you could absolutely do that. But for the sake of this particular server that I'm working with right now, it just made more sense to just do this volume and be done with it. So below that, of course, you got services. It's going to be Uptime Kuma. Images is Lewis Lamb's Uptime Kuma. Container name, again, because we're doing this in Portainer, this line doesn't matter, but if you're going to deploy this via command line using a Docker Compose file, that would be very, very important. So you can leave that or remove it depending on what you're going to do. Again, volumes, we declared our volume up here, right there. So that's what we're using right there. And then our port is 3001. If you got to change it, only change the first half, leave that second half as it currently is at 3001. And then once you've got all of that set up, it really just is as simple as pressing deploy the stack. And that's how easy it is to set up. When you first go there, you'll be asked to create a password, do that, log in, and then you'll basically be here with no services to monitor. Add your services and you're good to go. So in this part of the video, what I want to cover is domain names, name servers, A records, things like that, that we're going to need in order to get NGINX Proxy Manager set up. So here we are, we're logged into my GoDaddy account. I've only got one domain here because Porkbun doesn't support .ch domains at this time. So unfortunately, I have to keep this one domain here. That's super frustrating, but I've talked to Porkbun about this. They just don't support CH domains yet. So here we are, we're in GoDaddy. We're taking a look at the DNS management for dbte.ch. That's my link shortening URL that I've had for a couple of years now. So here we can see that I've got my name servers set up to go to gabe.ns.cloudflare.com and gene.ns.cloudflare.com. And that is because I use Cloudflare for all of my hosting DNS management, whether I'm hosting on one-on-one, self-hosting, whatever. I always use Cloudflare as an intermediary for some additional security that they provide for free. So as it says on this page, it says we can't display your DNS information because your name servers aren't managed by us. And that's where this comes in down below. So I can't actually do anything with my DNS here because I pointed everything to Cloudflare. And in a moment, we'll take a look at Cloudflare and kind of the process of getting that set up. So what I wanted to show next is actually Porkbun. There's a couple of different screens on here that I want to show as far as Porkbun is concerned. So here we go. We're going to take a look at this dbtech.click domain. If you want to pick up a .click domain, I will have some information in the description down below where you can pick up to 3 .click domains for 99 cents a piece for the first year. There is a limit to 3 per account. So basically here you can also see there are 7 records in here, but the authoritative name servers again are for Cloudflare. So anything I do in here won't matter, not because the DNS is pointed somewhere else. They just have it set up so that you can still see your DNS here, even if you're pointed somewhere else. And I actually prefer this to the way GoDaddy does things, because if I wanted to set up all of my records here and then point back, I would have less downtime than the way GoDaddy has things set up. So, but because, like I said, all of my DNS stuff is pointed to Cloudflare, I can't do anything here. So let's come over to here. Here I've got tutorialserver.xyz. I bought this a while ago thinking I was going to do something with it. Never did. Here we are. But you can see that the DNS records here, there are 8 of them. Also, the authoritative name servers are pointed to Porkbun. So anything I do in the DNS records on here will be reflected when the DNS propagates from Porkbun. So if I were to come into here, I would have all of my my DNS set up through Porkbun's DNS manager. If I wanted to, basically right now we've got aliases, we've got CNAMEs, we've got MX records, we've got SRV records, we've got text records. The one thing we don't see here is an A record. So an A record is what you would use to point a domain or a subdomain to an IP address. This is very, very common. This is kind of how things work. So if I wanted to set up an A record, let's say I wanted to set up demo dot, and we just type in the subdomain. We don't put the dot or the HTTP or any of that stuff here. We only put the first part of the domain name here because it's already got this. And again, this specific layout is for pork bun. They're all going to be a little different. So right here is where you'd put in the IP address for your home, right here where it says answer. That, of course, is not my IP address. That's just some numbers I typed in. Now, when you're using a first-party DNS solution, whether it's GoDaddy, Porkbun, wherever you buy your domains from, there will almost always be a delay. And so if I were to click add right now and then ping that demo.tutorialserver.xyz, it may take anywhere from 4 to 24 hours for that IP address to show up in the ping. And that's another reason that I like to use Cloudflare for my DNS management. Now, the one thing I do want to say about using a first-party solution like this, whether it's GoDaddy, Porkbun, whoever you buy your domain names from, if you just set this up as it currently is like this, the problem that you're going to run into is that if somebody were to ping your domain name, your IP address would show up. So if I were to set this up and click ping or go to my command terminal, type in ping.tutorialserver.xyz, I would get a result of 123.45.65.78. In that case, that would actually be my home IP address, and I don't want that because you end up running into an issue where people could DDoS your IP and bypass your domain name. There are lots of different things that they could do with your IP address. So I don't advise using anything other than Cloudflare, to be completely honest with you. So in this case, what I would want to do, like we've seen over here on this dbtech.click, the name servers are pointed to Cloudflare. So let's take a look at Cloudflare, and I can kind of give you a better idea of what's going on here. So right here is Cloudflare, and I'm logged in. I've already got this dbtech.click set up in here. It's a very simple process. When you add a domain name to it, it will tell you what your name servers need to be. So you would put in your domain name on a page, click go. It would scan that domain name, figure out what its current records are, import them, and they give you the opportunity to change them before it actually goes live and does its thing. So here we've got an A record. Now, again, this is an A record, again, lets us point a domain name to an IP address. So here we've got dbtech.click and my IP address that you can't see. So if I were to open this up, let's do just CMD and type in, ping dbtech.click and hit go. That 172.67.203.151 is not my IP address. It is actually a Cloudflare IP address that kind of obfuscates your IP address and gets routed through Cloudflare, where they do things like DDoS protection, again, IP obfuscation, DNS caching, lots and lots of really cool stuff to help keep you safe, plus allow you to have a much faster DNS response. So what do I mean by a faster DNS response? So for the sake of this tutorial, what I want to do is set up a record here. So we've already got an A record set up for dbtech.click. And if I wanted to, I could set up an A record here, and I could say status. And then with their system with Cloudflare, I can actually just type in @ and it will automatically fill in the dbtech.click. That way there's absolutely no chance of you accidentally fat fingering your domain name. It's really just that simple. So here we've got our A record set up for status.dbtech.click, and we've got a proxy status over here. So what proxied means is it will point your domain name to a Cloudflare IP address. Again, you want this for security purposes. However, when you're setting up a domain name for NGINX Proxy Manager, you want to turn this off. The reason for that is when you use NGINX Proxy Manager to set up an SSL, you'll most likely use Let's Encrypt. And Let's Encrypt wants direct access to your IP address for authentication purposes. So in order to make sure that Let's Encrypt can access your actual IP address, we turn proxy status off. So then I can click Save, and now our domain name is basically set up and ready to go. Oops. Except that I forgot with A records, you actually have to type in the IP address of your server. So let's just go ahead and do this, right? We're going to set up status.dbtech.click to point to that IP address. We're going to say DNS only. We'll click Save. So now, if I come over to here and I say ping status.dbtech.click. Okay, so nothing is happening there. It can't actually ping it. But what you will notice here is that the IP address that I've got in Cloudflare is what's returning here. So that's how quickly that domain name or that DNS for that subdomain propagated. That's why I like using Cloudflare, because it's basically instant rather than that 4 to 24-hour wait period that you'll often get with domain registrars. So what I like to do, instead of setting up an A record for all of my subdomains, what I like to do is this. Let's delete that. Let's come over here and click delete and click delete. They like to put in lots of safeguards so you don't accidentally delete something you don't mean to delete there. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a record this time. So the reason that I like to use C names instead of A records for subdomains and things like that is because a C name points to a canonical URL. So whatever your .com, .net, whatever, it's going to point to your main A record there. And basically what happens is if let's say your home IP address changes, you've got your ISP changes your IP address every 30 days or whatever. Then you only have to go in and update the A record, and all of the CNAME records update automatically. You don't have to go in and manually update all of those A records because there's only one, and all of the CNAME records just automatically point to that single A record. It makes management a ton easier in that case. Now, on the flip side of that, if you wanted to set up a subdomain to point to a different IP address on a different server and then be at a different location or whatever, you would absolutely set up an A record for that subdomain to point to that different location. But because we're dealing with home servers, self-hosting, you're probably only going to have one IP address at your location. So an A record for your domain name and a C record for your subdomains is really the best course of action in almost all situations. Instead, we're going to create a C name. We're still going to call this status, and our target in this case will be @ I misspoke earlier, but in this case, I know very well that we can use @ here. So again, if I want NGINX Proxy Manager to use Let's Encrypt for our SSL, we want to make sure that we turn off our proxy status to DNS only and click Save. So let's go ahead and let's ping that again. Oops, I lied. Let's do an ipconfig / DNS. So right there is my real IP address, and I'm going to block that so you can't see it. But I will show a couple of the numbers so that you can see that they are different. Also, this is all in real time, and that's how quickly Cloudflare lets you manage your DNS. It really is basically in real time. So now that we have our subdomain pointed to our home's IP address, now we can actually jump over to NGINX Proxy Manager. Of course, this tutorial is kind of dependent on whether or not you've got NGINX Proxy Manager set up. I will have a couple of links in the description on how to set that up, both for x86 as well as Raspberry Pi platforms. That'll all be in the description down below. So what we can do now, like I said, is go over here to NGINX Proxy Manager. And here we can see that I've got a bunch of stuff in here. Some of them are online, some of them are disabled. I do a lot of testing in here. So what I want to do is actually add a proxy host. So what I'm going to do is type in status.dbtech.click, and I'm going to leave the scheme as HTTP. Now, if you had a container that also had a self-signed certificate in it, for instance, you may have a container that's got like port 80 and port 443 as its default. In that case, you could refresh or reset this to HTTPS and point to the secure port over there on this section right here. However, this particular Uptime Kuma container does not have that. So what we're going to do is just leave that as HTTP. I'm going to type in the IP address of my server that this is on. We can come back over here and see this is 192.168.1.183, and we're on port 3001. So the next thing I want to do is add 3001 to right there. It's always good to block common exploits. And each container is going to be a little bit different in how it's built. Some containers will require WebSocket support, some won't. You may have to play around with that a little bit in order to see if your container will work with or without it. Now, I've already tested this without it, this Uptime Kuma, and it does not work without WebSocket support. It actually throws up an error message that says, hey, WebSocket couldn't be contacted or whatever. So I came back in here and turned this on, and then everything worked just fine. So If we wanted to, we could create an access list so that you would have to have a username and password to access anything on this container, and then again another username and password to administrate or to administer the container. So you can absolutely do that down here. Set up an access list that way. But we're just going to keep this as simple as possible here. So what I'm going to do next is come over to this SSL tab. I'm going to come down to here. I'm going to request a new SSL. I'm going to force SSL and an HTTP2 support. If you had your domain set up with HSTS, you could do that. And in fact, there is some information about that. We're not going to do that. We're also not going to do a DNS challenge. If you wanted to, you absolutely could. However, I'm just going to say I agree to Let's Encrypt's terms of service, and I'll click Save. And if everything goes correctly, here in a minute, this page is going to reload, and then we'll have access to our domain name.
A few moments later.
Okay, so here we are just a moment later, and it refreshed with no issues, no error messages, anything like that. So because I've got this blurred out for my own, or for security purposes, so you can't see what domain names I've got set up on my home server, what we're going to do is just look for the created date of September 27th, which is right there. We can also see the IP address and port right there. And if I were to click this, it would probably work. But before we do that, there's a couple of things that we want to do first. The first being, we want to come over here and click on Edit. This is just one of those weird little things with NGINX Proxy Manager that if you do this, you usually have to come back in here and reforce SSL and HTTP2 support. So we'll click Save there. And then we'll come over here. We're going to edit this in Cloudflare. We're going to click DNS only, switch that to proxied, and then we're going to go ahead and click on Save. And basically that's going to make sure that our IP address is obfuscated, that domain name is getting DDoS protection. We're getting all of the stuff that we would want for protection that you would expect to get from Cloudflare, even on their free plan. So let's go ahead and come back over to here. Right here is that domain name, like we had mentioned before. So I'm going to click that. Oops, what the?
Fix.
So if we click this here, it's going to throw an error. And the reason for that is because I am dumb and I fat fingered something there. That is not an IP address. So let's fix that real quick. Let's actually add .1 into there like so and click Save. Give that a moment. Now we can click it. There we go. So now we have our dashboard. Here we've got status.dbtech.click/dashboard. So let me get logged in. Like so, and now we've got all of that set up and ready to go. So definitely be careful when you're typing in your IP addresses that you don't accidentally miss an entire octet of your IP address there. So now that we've done all of that, let's take another look at this. So before, when we did when we pinged status.dbtech.click, my home IP address showed up and we don't want that. So let's again click that. And right there, now we've got 104.21.58.113, even though nothing changed other than me toggling this box right here. And that's how you can do that and obfuscate your IP address to make sure that nobody is able to DDoS you directly, as long as you're very careful about where you share your home's IP address, which should only be with your DNS management solution. So I know this video was kind of long, and I kind of apologize for that, but I kind of don't. I had too many people saying, hey, I'm having a hard time getting an SSL to work on my system using NGINX Proxy Manager and Cloudflare and all of this stuff. So I really wanted to kind of dive a little deeper and explain a bit more thoroughly than I had in the past on how to get a domain name to work through Cloudflare and NGINX Proxy Manager, that sort of thing. And of course, all of this does require you to have port 80 and port 443 port forwarded from your modem to your server. Now, I'm not going to show how to do that because my situation is a little different than a lot of people out there. I've got a modem from my ISP. I've got an Xfinity modem, and then I've got my own Ubiquiti network solution in the middle between my modem and the rest of my network. So what I have to do is forward from my modem to my router, from my router to my server. So there's multiple jumps in there. that I don't want to have to try to explain because it's going to be different for everybody. Just know that you will have to get ports 80 and 443 from your internet provider to your actual server. Whatever steps are required to do that, you'll have to figure out for yourself. But just know that there may be multiple jumps if you've got multiple levels of hardware in between your modem and your server. So hopefully this video kind of helped clear up some confusion, that sort of thing. Of course, if you've got questions, leave that in the comment section down below. Try to be as detailed as possible in your comment, in your question. Just saying something like "it doesn't work" doesn't tell me anything. It just tells me that it doesn't work, and I don't know what you've tried. I don't know what your setup is. I don't know anything about what your situation is. And if you just say it doesn't work, you're going to get a video response of a rant that I went on a few years ago about how to get tech support. So be descriptive in your comments, your questions, that sort of thing, if you want a good, solid answer. But I think this video has really gone on long enough, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I do want to, however, give a big shout out to my channel members, my patrons. If you guys would like to support the channel, definitely there are links in the description down below, as well as that membership button right below this video where you could support the channel that way. So if you want to support the channel in any way, definitely go ahead down to the description area. You find all kinds of different ways to do that. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As always, thanks for your time. I always appreciate your support, and I'll talk to you in the next video.